Hello, in this video I'm going to show you something about loops. We are going to see how to write a for loop or a while loop and convert it to the other. So we'll write a while loop and convert it to a for loop, or write a for loop and see how to change that to a while loop. And also in the process we will be able to see where it's a good idea to use while loops and where it's a good idea to use for loops. But nonetheless, we should be able to go between the two. We should know how to be able to take a while loop and change it to a for loop. Okay, so here is a program that we are going to do. Write a console program with a main function that prompts the user to type a given number of integers, then prints the largest and smallest of all the numbers typed in by the user. You may assume the user enters a number greater than 0 for the number of numbers to read. Okay, so all numbers greater than 0. That's what it says. Here's an example dialog. Number of numbers, the user enters 4. Number 1, they enter 5. Number 2, they enter 13. Number 3, minus 5. Number 4, 2. And we say biggest equals 13 and smallest equals minus 5. Okay. So let's do this first with a while loop. Then we will see how to change it over to a for loop. Okay. So let's get our regular stuff going here, our standard stuff that we need. Int main. Okay, so first let's start with our design document as we talk about it. What variables do we need? What output variables do we need? And what are we actually going to do with this stuff? So what input variables do we need? We need one for the total number of numbers. Okay, so let's call that int size. That gives me the number of integers, or count, let's call it count, equals 0. And then I want one to be able to read each number. Remember, we're not storing the numbers. We are going to have one variable, we'll call it usernum, and we are going to keep overriding that same variable inside the loop. All I need to know at the end is what is the biggest and what is the smallest. I really don't need to keep track of all the numbers, right? So one variable. And speaking about the output variables, I do need one for max, we'll call it max, and min, or you can call it biggest and smallest, whatever makes sense. Really, that's what that is, okay? So two variables for the output. So input, output variables will take care of the first few questions of my design document, input and output variables. Then we get user input, okay? So user input would be cout, enter, just like my sample run says, enter the number of numbers you wish to enter. That will be read into count, right? Cin to count. Okay, now here is where the process starts. Let's think about it. After that, everything that is being read is being repeated. The count is not repeated. So until that point, we don't have to start a loop. Now we need to start a loop. How far should we go? How many times should we read? That's what the count says, right? So we could have a loop that has the condition that says while something has not reached count. So I need some kind of a counter to keep track of that. So let's have another variable called counter that starts at 0 that we will increment every time, right? So while counter less than 4, because the user said they wanted to do, in this example, 4 numbers. So if we start at 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, including 0, we will get up to 4. So it depends on how we write the while loop, okay? So here is where read numbers from the user. Okay, all right. So while counter less than 4, we output, my sample run says we're going to enter number 1, number 2, and so on and so forth. So we need number, let's start a counter at 1 because that'll make more sense here. And let's say counter less than or equal to 4, because then I can use the counter as my variable here to output counter Do I have a, yeah, I do have a colon there, like that, like that. And we'll stop the cout statement there. And then we will tell the user to enter their number. And we're going to read that into user num. That's what we have user num for. Okay. All right. So user num gets read. So this loop will just read numbers. What we want to do is in the loop, we want to be able to find the min and the max, or the largest and the smallest. So let's set our min and max to some initial values. And it's always good to set them to the first value in the list, right? So in order to do that, we must read this one time outside the loop. So let's read the number. The first number can be read outside the loop one time, okay? So let's read the first number outside. And let's set max equals user num, min equals user num. So the first number gets set to the user num that the user enters. Counter starts at 1. The user has already entered one number, so I have to increment counter one time. Okay. Now I can go into the loop and I can start reading the next number. The first number, remember, has already been saved into max and min. So I go into the loop, I read the next number, and I check if the number, so let me add a comment, check for max. Okay, if user num greater than max, if the number that they enter is greater than max, then max becomes, the new max becomes the user num that the user entered, right? Now check for min the same way. It's a little different, not exactly the same way. If user num is less than min, then min becomes, the new min is the user num that they enter. Okay, so we are just checking to see. So for example, if the user enters 5, max and min will be 5 initially to start with. Then the user enters 13. We compare 13 with 5. Is 13 greater than 5? Yes, it is. So now max becomes 13. Then don't have an else. This is a separate if. If 13 is less than 5, again, remember the first number is 5, we set min to 5. If 13 is less than 5, then min becomes 13. 13 is not less than 5. So min remains at 5. We never go into this if. And we will go back to the while to get the next number. What should I do? I should increment counter plus plus. Okay. And when I come out of there, I should be able to say max equals max out min equals min. And we should finish our program. Okay, let's see how this works. Let's try it. And run it. Okay, so it says enter the number of numbers you wish to enter. I want to enter 4 numbers. Number 1, 5. Number 2, 13. Number 3, minus 5. Number 4, 2. So it says max is 13 and min is minus 5. Okay, so it looks like the algorithm works fine. Okay, so now let's change this while to a for. How do we do that? So in this case, we have one input outside. So which part should we actually change or put it inside the for loop, right? We want to be able to set max and min to user num, which we have done. So can we put our for here instead of this while? I'm going to comment out this while. Okay, let's say I put a for here. For counter is already set. Okay, so the first statement always in the for loop is where do we want to initialize it? So counter is already going for me. So I don't have to put anything there. I can put an empty statement. How far do I want to go? What is there inside my while condition is exactly the same condition. So copy that condition and put it in here. It's exactly the same condition. And what was happening in my while loop? What was my update statement doing? This update statement that's at the bottom of your while, take it and put it over here. Okay. So now everything that we need is inside the for loop, no semicolon there. Okay. So counter plus plus, counter is already where I want it to be. So I'm not going to do anything in the first part of the for. Counter is less than or equal to 4 is my condition. Counter plus plus is the increment statement. So we've simply taken that while and converted it into a for. That's all we can do in this case, really. But it's a for loop nonetheless. Also shows you that you don't have to have every single statement in your for loop. A semicolon simply says I have an empty for and have an empty statement there. I have nothing to put in there. Now your output should work exactly the same, right? I forget what my numbers are. Let's go up and check. First number is 5. The program should not change as far as the output goes. And it still works the same way, right? Let's try one more. Make sure our algorithm is actually working. Let's try 5 numbers. 1, 2, 3, 11. And I got only 4 numbers. So that's a problem. Okay, so let me check what my algorithm has a problem here. Counter less than or equal to 4 is not right. There's a reason I had count, right? We read from the user. Okay, so that's a bug. Let's set that back to count. Should be count. This also shouldn't be 4. That's a problem. So that should be count, which is why I read count in the first place. Okay, so that was a bad bug. Now that we fixed it, this is what we call a logical error. This was very unintentional, but also goes on to show how you can have logical errors in your problem, in your programs that I did not mean for that. So now it should ask me to enter 5 numbers. Let's enter a negative number as well. So there, max is 23 and min is -3. Okay, so takeaways from this, you can take any loop and convert it into a for loop or a while loop. For this case, a while loop is probably a good idea already, although you can write a for loop as well. You don't always have to have every single statement in there. The condition is required, but the rest of them, you could have an empty statement here and you could, have the other statements and it looks like that. So hope this helps you in studying for loops.